Okay, so just a little bit of a rearrangement before we went live. So hopefully everyone can hear me. And if you're joining me for the first time, my name's Phil and welcome to the IELTS Grind live stream. So just get myself set up here. So today we are quite lucky because we have me on screen and hopefully Michael will be joining us in the chat. Okay, right, so let's talk about a few things before we get started. So first of all, if you're joining us for the very first time here on the IELTS Grind, we are going live on a very regular basis. So you can come to the IELTSgrind.com to the live stream schedule, and you'll find on this page a list of all the live streams we're doing. So if you see today, Monday the 14th, it's me, Phil, at 7 PM Taiwan time, and we're looking at pie charts for task 1. You can see all the other live streams here. So if you don't know what time exactly, you can check out our handy little clock here. So the IELTS Grind, Phil, me and Michael, we're based in Taiwan. So the time that we list on our update here is the time in Taipei. But you can compare that to where you live to make sure that you're on time. Naz is here. Excellent. Hello, how are you? So the other thing to remember is if you go to any of the descriptions on any video on the channel, there's quite a lot of useful information. What you'll find is public band score descriptors for writing and speaking, and this will tell you exactly the score that you need. So if we look for writing, for example, so this one is for task 2 and there's another one for task 1, and it tells you all of the different criteria for marking. So that's all very important. We got Merish as well. Hello, how are you? Okay, so today what we're going to do is talk about the pie chart questions in task 1. So this is the academic version of the test, and we're going to go through a few things today. This is more of a kind of a lesson rather than the kind of corrections that we do. But don't forget that if you do want to send us an essay to correct, you can find the my head's disappeared, my camera's gone off again. You can find above my head, there is an email address which is corrections@theieltsgrind.com, and you can send an email with a task 1 or task 2 essay, and we will correct that for free. And at the moment we will correct as many essays as you send us. So just be aware that in the future this may become a paid service. So my advice is take advantage of 2 native speakers right now. Okay, so today's lesson objectives. We're going to go through and review the sentence structure for pie charts. Now, we've already spoken about this in previous videos and previous live streams, so I won't go into massive detail here, but there are some important things to remember. We're also going to review the essay structure for pie charts for task 1 in general. We're going to talk about selecting key features for pie chart questions. What exactly should you look out for? And also we're going to be brainstorming an essay plan for a particular question before I give you an example model answer. Okay, so if you're in chat, don't forget, leave lots of questions. If there's anything you would like us to talk about in more detail, feel free to leave a comment. And if you do enjoy the video, at some point, give us a like. That really does help us out. Okay, so let's jump into the first thing, sentence structure. Okay, so let's talk about the basic sentence structure for reporting pie charts. Now the thing with pie charts is if you don't include the right sort of information in the right way, it can significantly lower your score, because in English we talk about pie chart data in a particular way. So this is a question for Naz and Marish. You have a pie chart here which is all about the percentage of voters, and it's split between male and female. So if you're feeling brave, would you like to write a sentence describing one part of this pie chart? What would we say? How could we describe the percentage of voters? I'll give you a little bit of a second to think about it. So getting the structure right is key for pie charts. We don't have many ways to describe data. So if you don't learn the basic sentence structure, it can be quite tricky. Okay. So how could we describe either part of this pie chart? Talking about percentage of voters. I'll give you a little bit of time because there is a delay. Okay, and hopefully everyone can see this on the screen. What I will do probably is share this file later on. Okay, so this is what we were hoping for. 50% of voters were male, or 50% of voters were female. So we could also say half of voters were female. So if we look at this, how is the information presented? Well, what we do is we talk about percentage, then we talk about the group, we have a verb, and we have a category, which gives us something like this. 50% percentage voters, group, were, that's the verb, and a category is male. Okay, so we want to have this information, because if we said 50% were male, it doesn't make sense. 50% of what were male? So this is the basic recipe to pie charts, how you report the data. Percentage, group, verb, and category. Now, this is perhaps a simple way to present it. We can present the same information in more complex ways, but the components, the part of the question, or sorry, the part of the sentence, doesn't change that much. So let's have a look at some more examples. So here, instead of having just two parts of the pie chart, we have three parts. Okay. So how could we describe one of the three parts? So again, here's an example. 1/3 of Americans prefer eating beef. So it's the same thing. 1/3 is the percentage. Americans is the group. The verb, prefer eating, and the category, beef. So although we've changed the pie chart, the general structure remains the same for reporting the data. Okay. So what we've got here are slightly more advanced pie chart sentences. Okay. And let's just go through them. So the first one says, in 2010, Facebook was by far the most used website and accounted for 30% of all teenage social media visits. So here, excellent, Naz. Thank you for submitting the sentence. I am moving a little bit quickly through this because perhaps some of you have seen that a little bit before. But let's explain the first sentence there. So Facebook here is the group, okay? And accounted for is the verb, 30% is the percentage, all teenager social media visits, that's the category. Another example, YouTube only brought in 20% of all social media interactions, which was still more than Pinterest. So again, YouTube is, sorry, well, I got my colors wrong here. So YouTube should be the group in green, and brought in is the verb, 20% percentage of all social media interactions. That should be in blue actually, because it's the category. Okay, I got my colors a little bit wrong here. Never mind. But the key thing to know is we're reporting groups, we're reporting categories, because it does change your answer. If you said YouTube only brought in 20%, which was still more than Pinterest, if I hadn't mentioned social media interactions, then it wouldn't make sense if this was a sentence on its own. Another example, by 2020, YouTube had shot to prominence as the most popular form of social media for youths, gaining 11% more visits than its 2010 figure. So here we've got the verb, the percentage, we've got the group, the visits, and the category. All other social media platforms lost just 1% of traffic from teenage users from 2010 to 2020, ending with 9% of the market. So you can see that even though the sentences are a little bit more complex, we don't have exactly the same order as the basic structure we looked at before. We still have the same components, because without the components it doesn't make sense. Okay, so remember, if we go back, you need percentage, you need group, you need the verb, and you need the category. Okay, and we always have that even in advanced sentences. Okay, right, so let's go through and talk about the essay structure. So we need an introduction of some sort. This is when we write one sentence, normally introducing the context of the data. So a good example of this is the pie charts show. Now, many students don't like to write. So sorry about the yellow color. It may not be very easy to see on the screen. I did this on PowerPoint and then uploaded it to Google Docs and it changed it. So I apologize for that. Yes, so many students, they said the pie charts show. They don't like to say this. They think it's too basic. They think because the question says this, they shouldn't use the word show. It doesn't matter. As long as you adapt everything that follows, it's okay. You can use the phrase the pie chart shows. It won't affect your score. Then we have the overview. Okay, now Michael and I, we always recommend that you put the overview at the beginning. This is for two reasons. The first reason is if you forget to write an overview, you cannot get higher than a band 5 in your task achievement, which is one of the 4 categories that you're graded on. How well did you approach the task? And the other thing is we put it at the beginning is because you might forget it. If you put it at the beginning, you won't forget. So this is perhaps 1 to 2 sentences giving the big picture of the trend or the data. So normally what I tell my students is if you look at the pie chart or any form of data, what is the thing you notice in the first 30 seconds? that is normally what the big trend is. That's normally what the overview is about. The most obvious trends, the most obvious change in behavior of data, that's what you write in your overview. So always write overall at the beginning. This shows the examiner that this is your overview. And don't include percentages, don't include data. Try not to include any percentages or data in your overview, because if you include it in your overview, you have less things to write about later on, and you make it more difficult for yourself. So try to keep the overview about the trend or what's happening to the data. Okay? And then the last part of the structure is the body. And this is where you provide supporting sentences which prove your overview. If you imagined that your overview was like an argument, something that you're putting forward, something that you are saying is true, what you include in the body of your task 1 essay should prove that to be true. So you want to include the data and the supporting sentences that show your overview to be true. Okay? But of course, we don't want to include any opinions, we don't need to explain why the data happened, and we don't need a conclusion. So here you select only the key features and provide data to back up what you say. So make sure that you don't list everything, and make sure that you include percentages at least a few times. Many of my students, I had an exam, a mock exam on Saturday, and one student didn't write down any numbers in task 1, and they got a band 5 just because their grammar was good. So make sure you include numbers. Okay, so that's the structure. If you have any questions at all, any feedback, like you can't read something on the screen, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. We're working on trying to make these live streams better each and every time. Okay, so key features. So here we're going to need a little bit of concentration, a little bit of help. So first of all, which features should you select? So you've got on screen 2 pie charts. So normally when you have a question just about pie charts, you're going to have a minimum of 2 pie charts. You would never have one pie chart on its own. There's always a pie chart with a second pie chart at least, or with a graph or a table. You would not just have one pie chart, because it would be very difficult to select or compare features. You would just be listing. So we have 2 pie charts here. Now hopefully you can see that. I will read it out to you. So it's about transport taken to work in 2010 and 2020. So in 2010, I'll just read out the numbers to you. We have car at 30%, bicycle at 20%, MRT, which is basically the metro, the tram, something like this, 15%, bus is 25%, and other is 10%. Hopefully that all matches up to 100%. It should do. And for 2020, a car is now 25%, bicycle is 31%, MRT is 15%, bus is 20%, and the other is now 9%. Okay, so what are the features that you would select? What are we looking for? Okay, so this is what I recommend. Firstly, you look for the biggest numbers. So looking at 2010 and 2020, what are the biggest numbers? I'll give you a bit of time to think about that. So what are the biggest numbers in 2010 and the biggest number or numbers in 2020? If you want to put that in a comment in the chat, that'd be excellent. Looks like Michael's just joined us. So Michael, we're looking at the biggest numbers in 2010 and 2020. So in about a minute, if no one else is giving their answer, how about you put in what you think the answer is? Okay, yeah, so excellent. Naz, we've got bicycle in 2020 and in 2010. Hopefully we can see this on the screen. Okay, yeah, that's right, Michael. We'll let Naz answer it. You're useless at this anyway, aren't you? Okay. So we've got, yeah, bicycle in 2020 and car 30% in 2010. What about the smallest numbers? So what's the smallest percent in 2010 and the smallest percent in 2020? So we're lucky to have Michael with us. He's got a day off today. Today is a special festival, the Dragon Boat Festival in Taiwan. So everyone has a bank holiday, a day off, as I would say. So the smallest number in 2010 and 2020 is actually the same category. It's other forms of transport. Okay. What else should we be looking out for when we're analysing the pie chart? Well, we want to look at biggest change. Is there a number here that changed much more than any other category, or more significantly than any other category? So if we look through it, is there a much bigger change for any of it? So hopefully I'm not covering up too many of the percentages with the arrows. Yeah, so yeah, Naz, you're right. So the other transportation was pretty much the same throughout. Certainly the smallest number. But which category changed the most? We've got car 30%, then 25%, bicycle 20%, then 31%, MRT 15 and 15%, the bus was 25% and then 20%, and the other transport went from 10 to 9. So which one changed the most? Yeah, so that's it. If we look, it's bicycle that changed the most. It had an 11% change, and the others were about 5% normally. And the other thing we want to look out for is opposite trends. So if we go through it, so we had car went down from 30 to 25, bicycle went up from 20 to 31, the bus went down from 25% to 20, other transportation went down from 10 to 9, but what happened to the MRT? Well, we can see the MRT, it stayed the same, 15%. So this is an opposite trend. Okay. So when you're thinking of key features to select, normally you want to look for the biggest numbers and the smallest numbers. Then see if there's anything that changed significantly more or proportionally more than anything else. And I also like to look for opposite trends. Is everything doing something, but one category does something very different? That's what I call an opposite trend. If all numbers are increasing, but one number is decreasing, that would be an opposite trend. If all numbers are either going up or going down, but like the MRT here, it stays the same, that's also an opposite trend. Okay? So this is the kind of thing that we're looking for. Okay. So task 1, essay planning. So we're going to look at a question which is inspired by real exam questions, and we're going to try and figure out what we want to say. Okay, so first of all, this is the exam question, so I'll read it out to you slowly. So writing task 1, you should spend about 20 minutes on this task. The graphs below show, oh, that's a typo by me. The graphs below show the annual proportion of time British teenagers spent on various social media platforms. Okay, this is what happens when you copy things. Okay, excellent. I feel better about that. The graphs below show the annual proportion of time British teenagers spent on various social media platforms. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Write at least 150 words. Okay, so I will read this out to you, although we've seen similar, in fact identical data just before. Okay, so we've got 2010 social media, 2020 social media. And this time we've got Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, Twitter, and other. But you'll notice the numbers, the percentages are the same from what we just saw. So we got in 2010, 30% Facebook, 20% YouTube, 15% Pinterest, 25% Twitter, 10% other. In 2020, it's 25% Facebook, 31% YouTube, 15% Pinterest, 20% Twitter, and 9% other. Okay? Right. So, let's go through this. I'm getting a lot of praise from Michael, but I don't know why. Okay, so that is the question we're thinking about. Okay, so we've got the pie charts again, and here are some questions I would like you to think about. What's the biggest percentage in 2010? What's the biggest percentage in 2020? What's the smallest percentage in 2010? What's the smallest percentage in 2020? What's the biggest percentage change in 2010 to 2020? And were there any opposite trends? Okay. Now, if you were listening closely in what we just looked at, this will be very simple to you. So think about it for a minute. We're looking at social media use by British teenagers, and we're going to be planning this question. What are we going to write about? What are the key features? What should we include? Okay. So, Michael, if no one writes anything in the next 2 minutes, you're going to tell me what the biggest percentage in 2010 was. Okay. So give me 2 minutes and see what happens. So just while you're typing, don't forget that we're going live almost every day this week. We'll be live at different times from today until Saturday. And you can find all of that on the website, which it should be in the description of this video. And if not, you can find it at the IELTSgrind.com. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, we also have a Discord channel which you can join, where you can chat with other people. We're trying to build up a community where everyone can find a speaking partner to help you improve your fluency. So the more people that join us, the better your fluency will become. The information for that is in the description. And we've also got the newsletter, which you can also join, where we've spent hours creating tips and free resources that help you with your studies. Yeah. I don't have any cool music at the moment, but I do know where we can get some. So perhaps Michael and I will invest in a subscription. I found a pretty good website where we can get music for only a couple of bucks a month. Perhaps we'll do that. Okay, yeah. So the biggest percent in 2010, as Michael said, was Facebook. The smallest percent in 2010 was other. The biggest percentage of change was, of course, YouTube. The biggest percentage in 2020 was also YouTube. Excellent. Krishna, thank you for the comment. That's absolutely right. Good. And what's the smallest percentage in 2020? It was other. And were there any opposite trends? Pinterest, because it stayed the same. So these are the key features we probably want to talk about. Okay, so let's think about it. In the intro, the introductory sentence of this essay, what do we want to write? Well, basically, we want to say the pie charts are about teenagers using social media. Medial, I don't know what a medial is, but media. Loads of typos today. Yeah. From 2010 to 2020. So the pie charts are about teenagers using social media 2010 to 2020. As long as we say something like this, it will be a good introductory sentence. The overview. What do we want to say? Well, basically, this is what we want to say. At least Facebook was the most popular social media platform for teenagers in 2010. YouTube became the most popular in 2020, and Pinterest didn't change. If we had that as an overview, the main ideas, that would be perfectly fine. Okay? And then in the body of the essay, we would supply supporting sentences which prove this overview to be true. We're just giving data that backs up what we say in the overview. So I would say in paragraph 1 of the body, we want to concentrate on 2010. Talk about the biggest numbers, the smallest numbers, etc. And then I would write in the second paragraph, we would compare 2020 to 2010 and talk about the biggest and smallest changes. So this is the basic information we want in this essay. So Naz has got an excellent sentence. So this is for an overview. The majority of individuals used the Facebook social platform, which accounts for 20%. However, most of the people were shifted to YouTube in 2020. Yeah, so I might say the majority of individuals used the Facebook social media platform, which accounted for 20%. However, most people, or most of the British teenagers, shifted to YouTube in 2020. Just make sure with YouTube, it's got to have a capital Y and a capital T. That's just the way we spell it. At least the capital letter, I would say, because it's a proper noun, it's a name. Why do we say most people and most of the teenagers. When we're referring to the majority, a large group, we say most people in the world. When we're talking about a particular group, we say most of the people here. So an example would be most men can grow a beard. Okay, but I would say most of the men in my family cannot grow a beard. Most men, general, can grow a beard. Most of the men in my family cannot. The men in my family, that's a specific group. Yeah. So just watch out for that one. Excellent. Yeah, YouTube. Good. Right. But excellent. Thank you so much, Naz, for writing sentences. You have no idea how happy that makes Michael and I when people interact. We really enjoy it. Okay. So we're coming to a model answer now. And this is what I would write for this question. Okay. So we've still got the same question. So the graphs, it's still going to be spelt wrong. Oh no. Oh no, I made the mistake so many times. Just talk amongst yourselves while I fix my terrible typo. The graphs below show the annual proportion of time British teenagers spent on various social media platforms. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so great. Mike's writing stuff in. Excellent. Okay, so this is my model answer for this. Okay, so let's go through it. I'll read it to you first of all, and then I'm going to pick it apart a little bit. Okay, so what I would like you to do is to copy this, and we will put this into the description. If Mike is particularly ambitious right now, he will find this in the Google Drive, which is it's in the June live streams, and add this to the the description, because I'm pretty sure it's not there right now. But this would be good to take this as an example and to try and adapt it. Okay, so it says the given pie charts compare the quantity of time adolescents in the UK spent on different social media accounts over a period of a decade. My introduction. Overall, Facebook and YouTube were the most popular forms of interaction online in 2020, although the latter had surpassed the former in popularity by that date. In fact, all forms of social media listed saw some change, with the exception of Pinterest. So that's my overview, and what I need to do now is provide data and features that show this is the case. Yeah. In 2010, Facebook was by far the most used website and accounted for 30% of all teenage social media visits. This was 5% more page views than the next most popular site, Twitter. YouTube only brought in 20% of all social media interactions, which was still more than Pinterest. By 2020, YouTube had shot to prominence as the most popular form of social media for youths, gaining 11% more visits than its 2010 figure. This was in stark contrast to Facebook, which only managed to gain roughly half that growth. Twitter, on the other hand, became less popular over time, and Pinterest remained steady, bringing 50% of all visits in both years. All other social media platforms lost just 1% of traffic from teenage users from 2010 to 2020, ending with 9% of the market. Okay, so let's have a little look at that, and I will try and break down what I did. So if we look at it in these terms of the overview, okay, So overall, Facebook and YouTube were the most popular forms of interaction online in 2020. So that's the first part of my overview. Where did I provide the information that backs that up? If we look in the first sentence of the paragraph 1 of the body, I said Facebook was by far the most used website and accounted for 30% of all teenage social media visits. Okay, so that was in 2010. So here I'm saying how Facebook was popular. I also talk about this in the first 2 sentences of the second paragraph. By 2020, YouTube had shot to prominence, meaning it's very important, as the most popular form of social media for youths, gaining 11% more visits than its 2010 figure. This was in stark contrast to Facebook, which only managed to gain roughly half of that growth. Okay, so in the first sentence, I'm backing up what I said in my first sentence of the overview, and in the second sentence, this was in stark contrast to. It's kind of talking about that second sentence where it says, although the latter had surpassed the former in popularity by that date. So I've got all that information backing that up. In the rest of my overview, I say, in fact, all forms of social media listed saw some change. If we look in the second paragraph of the body, I talk about Twitter, on the other hand, became less popular over time, and all other social media platforms lost just 1% of traffic from teenage users from 2010 to 2020, ending with 9% of the market. That is giving evidence for everything changing. And then, of course, with the exception of Pinterest, I talk about that in the second paragraph. And Pinterest remains steady, bringing in 50% of all visits in both years. Okay. Now, there are 2 sentences in yellow, which go, this was 5% more page views than the next most popular site, Twitter. YouTube only brought in 20% of all social media interactions, which was still more than Pinterest. These 2 sentences are really supporting what I say in the very first part of the overview, that Facebook and YouTube were the most popular forms of interaction online in 2020. They're contrasting the fact that other forms of media were more or less popular in 2010 and less popular in 2020. So that's basically the information I have that's backing things up. Okay, and if you go and look, you can have a look in this model answer, and there's a few good phrases that we can pick out. So for example, in the introductory sentence, we have adolescence, which is a good synonym for teenagers. We have the phrase over a period of a decade, which is a good alternative than saying 2010 to 2020. Okay. We have the phrase, we've got the grammatical form in the second part of the first sentence. I didn't highlight this, sorry. Although the latter had surpassed the former in popularity by that date. So the first thing I would pick out here is using past perfect, had surpassed. This is a great grammar opportunity. It's what Michael would say, flexing your grammar muscles. I could say this in many different ways, but I chose to use the past perfect because it's high level grammar. Okay, meaning that at some point before 2020, this thing happened. I also used the phrase the latter, the former. So the former means Facebook and the latter means YouTube. Again, this is high level vocabulary. Okay, and if we go through the rest of it, we can find a few more phrases here and there, particularly if we look in the second paragraph of body 2, shot to prominence. This is a good phrase to steal. The second sentence, this was in stark contrast to, meaning very different. So what I recommend you do, now that Michael has put this into the description, we may also put it in as a Google Doc so you can access just the model answer. Go in, you can steal all the good things, you can adapt it for your own use and different questions and have a go. Okay, so for now, this brings us to the end of the lesson part. But if anyone's in the chat and you have any questions about pie charts, you've got 2 native speakers ready to answer your questions, or any other questions you have about the IELTS. So I'm sure, Michael, if you've got any other tips you would want to add, anything that I missed, anything that you tell your students how to write a really good pie chart question, what else would you add? You're very welcome, Naz. We do really enjoy having you in the live streams. You make it a real pleasure for us. We love the interaction. Do you have any particular questions? I mean, pie charts can be tricky if you don't learn the basic sentence structure. When it comes to reporting the data, it's quite similar. Yeah. But that's the one thing, Mike and I, we always say this, students, if they don't learn the right sentence structure, they can often make mistakes here. So that's where you want to concentrate. And you can see that although I've used perhaps some high level sentence structures here, I always have the basic information. I report the percentage, I use verbs such as accounted for, brought in, many different verbs you can use for percentages. I use the group that I'm talking about, which may be social media platforms in this case, and the category. Things like Facebook, YouTube, etc. Okay, so as long as you have all of the components, then you're going to come up with the right answers. Okay, so struggling with reading. So when it comes to reading, Naz, there are 2 things, perhaps 3 things you need to concentrate on. Firstly, obviously, it's vocabulary and grammar. And there is no quick fix to vocabulary and grammar. You've got to build up your vocabulary knowledge, your vocabulary bank, basically. And you've got to build up your knowledge of grammar, because grammar is the one way that examiners use to separate lower level students and high level students by trying to confuse you. So what we recommend for reading, obviously, is you've got to read more. But we do not recommend that you spend all of your time reading IELTS related material. Okay? Whatever you're interested in, read about it in English. Read for fun. 20 minutes every single day, that's what Michael always recommends. And he actually makes his students do it. It's like a report card every lesson, but it really does work. Read for fun for 20 minutes. Just expose yourself to the language. That will help because you'll start to see vocabulary. And this happened to me. When I was learning French, I used to read and I learned so much. The other thing is you've got to work on your fluency. So you want to actually read things that are at a lower level than you are now, because if you're constantly stopping to look up a word, it's going to break up the flow and it's not going to be fun. So when you're reading for pleasure, don't read something like a medical journal. Read something like, a magazine or a web page, or a graded reader, something that's below your level. But for IELTS practice, we also recommend you do spend some time reading things like National Geographic, Time magazine. These are the kind of publications that they get the IELTS reading texts from. So you do want to spend some time doing that. The other thing that's going to help you improve your reading score is by having a strategy for the questions. So always read your questions first and try and identify key words to search for and key concepts to search for. If you have an idea of what the answer is connected to, that helps you get to the place quicker. What we don't recommend you do is read every single word in the exam paper. If you come back understanding everything that the text said, probably you've done very badly in the exam. If you come back and you're confident you've answered every question, but you don't know what the whole text is about, you've probably done quite well. It's one of those weird things. Don't read everything. So yeah, having a strategy for the reading questions is good. And the other thing connected to fluency is learning how to read more quickly, improving your skimming, scanning, and reading in detail skills. So we do have some videos about reading on this YouTube channel. Michael did a very, very good video all about Cambridge 15, about a particular text, and he identified how to spot tricky questions and explained exactly how the exam tries to trick you. So that's a really good video to look for. Okay, so yeah, right, so if there aren't any questions, anything else that we are going to discuss, I will say goodbye for today. But don't forget, we've got loads more live streams coming up. So just for the rest of the week, so today's Monday, you've already had a bonus lesson from Michael this afternoon. Michael will be back at 2 o'clock tomorrow, and he has a student essay, a task 2 student essay. On Wednesday I will be back, and I'm talking about tables, so how to answer table based questions. And then on Thursday, Michael is teaching you how to answer a problem solution, task 2 essay. I will be back on Friday for a correction in task 1, and then on Saturday for a student correction in task 2. If you want us to correct your essays, don't forget, send an email to corrections@theieltsgrind.com. You are in a very lucky situation because you're going to have 2 native speakers correcting your essays for free right now. And there is a 100% chance that we will look at your essay this week if you send it in to us in the next day or so. So don't forget, you can get your essays corrected for free right now. This will become a paid service in the future, so make sure you take advantage of it now while it's free. Thanks very much everyone for joining me. Thanks for Michael being in the chat, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.